Hey everyone, today we're diving into a piece of legislation that was and still is a massive deal. We're talking about the law that set out to build India's biggest safety net, the Unorganized Workers' Social Security Act of 2008.
What's amazing is that the law doesn't beat around the bush. Right from the get-go, it says its whole purpose is to provide social security and welfare to workers who basically been on their own, without any formal protections. Just that one sentence. Wow, that's a seriously ambitious goal.
So, here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll start with what this gigantic safety net is all about. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty. Who exactly are these unorganized workers? What kind of benefits are we talking about? Who's running the whole show? And super practically, how do you even get registered? Finally, we'll step back and look at the big picture.
All right, let's kick things off with the core mission. Why did this law even need to exist? What was the big problem it was trying to solve for India's economy and, more importantly, its people?
So, this thing was passed back in 2008, and right away it was made crystal clear. This law applies to the entire country. This wasn't some pilot program or a small experiment. Nope, this was a huge national framework designed to bring millions and millions of people under a social security umbrella, many for the very first time.
Okay, so that naturally leads us to the million-dollar question, right? Who are we actually talking about here? Who is an unorganized worker? The Act is pretty specific about this, so let's break down exactly who this was all for.
The law gives us this big umbrella definition. Basically, an unorganized worker is anyone who's a home-based worker, self-employed, or a wage worker, and, this is key, is not already covered by other big labor laws. Think of it like this. It's designed to catch everyone who is falling through the cracks of the existing system.
So, first up, you've got your home-based worker. This is exactly what it sounds like. Imagine a tailor stitching clothes for a brand, but from their own house. Or maybe an artisan making handicrafts at home for a company to sell. The key is they're working for an employer, just not at the employer's factory or office.
Next up, we have the self-employed worker. These are the folks who are their own boss, right? We're talking about the street vendor you buy your snacks from, a small farmer tending to their own patch of land, or even a rickshaw puller. They don't get a monthly paycheck from a company, but man, they are a vital part of the economy.
And the third type is the wage worker. Now, this is a massive category. It covers pretty much anyone who gets paid wages for informal work. Think about construction workers on a building site, someone working casually at a local shop, or the domestic help that works in so many homes. The whole point of the Act was to make sure all these people were included. Okay, so now we know who this law is for. The next big question is, what do they actually get out of it? And this is where it gets really interesting, because the Act sets up this cool two-tier system. It splits up the work of providing benefits between the central government and the state governments.
It's actually a pretty smart way to do it. The central government takes care of the big-ticket, universal stuff, things like life and disability insurance, health benefits, and old age pensions. But then, it lets the state governments handle schemes that are more tailored to local needs. We're talking about things like housing assistance, educational funds for kids, skill training. You get the idea. It creates this great mix of a national standard with local flexibility.
Now, a plan this huge needs a serious machine to make it run, right? You need people in charge of recommending these benefits, keeping an eye on how they're working, and just making sure the whole system doesn't fall apart. So, who are the people turning the gears?
The Act sets up this really clear parallel structure. At the national level, you have the National Social Security Board, which advises the central government. And then, mirroring that, every single state has its own state Social Security Board to advise the state government. These boards are basically the engines driving this whole thing.
And what's so important about this is that the National Board isn't just a room full of bureaucrats. Far from it. A huge chunk of the 34 members are representatives of the workers themselves and also their employers. The whole idea was to make sure that the very people this law affects have a real voice, a literal seat at the table where decisions are made. It's all about balance.
And it's the exact same story at the state level. The state boards also have a ton of seats reserved for worker and employer reps. This makes sure that local issues and on-the-ground concerns are baked right into how the state-specific benefits are created and rolled out. All right, let's get to the really practical stuff. This is probably what you've been waiting for. How does an actual worker get into this system and start getting these benefits? Well, the good news is the Act made the whole process surprisingly simple.
It really breaks down into a few easy steps. 1, you have to be at least 14 years old. 2, you just have to self-declare that you're an unorganized worker.
3, you take that information and apply it at your local district administration office. And that's it. In return, you get registered and they give you this portable smart ID card with your own unique number. That card, that's your key to the whole system.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a minute and look at the big picture here. What was the grand idea behind all of this? What was the ultimate goal? And what does it all mean as we look forward?
At its heart, the Act's vision was for a truly universal social security system. And it was smart about the money side too. It built in flexibility. A scheme could be paid for entirely by the government, or maybe split between the central and state governments. Or, and this is cool, it could even be co-funded with small contributions from the workers or employers. It was all about making it a collaborative, team effort to build this safety net.
And that brings us to the big final question, doesn't it? Back in 2008, this law was absolutely visionary. It was built for the economy of its time. But think about today's world. We have the gig economy, food delivery drivers, app-based cab services, freelance platform workers. The old lines between employer, employee, and self-employed are getting blurrier by the day. So the real question is this framework, designed more than a decade ago, still ready for the challenges of today's new economy? Is it equipped to protect this new generation of workers? That's the critical question we're left with.